Hi, I'm Bill Carmody, and I'm the Marketing Whisperer. And today I am very happy to have on the program Mayur Gupta, who is with Spotify. Mayur, how are you doing today?
Doing very well. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me over.
Good. Remind me, what is your title at Spotify again?
So I'm the Vice President of Growth and Marketing at Spotify.
Excellent. So, one of the things you and I were talking about was talking about how we as marketers need to be focused on solving the problem and not the symptom of the problem. So, I think that's where we're going to jump in for today. Yes?
That is right. Very exciting times, of course, for marketing and industries at large. And I think we see that every single day. So we'd love to chat more about it and discuss what's happening.
So let's just get right into it. So most marketers are looking to ultimately solve the problem, but your concern is that they're in process of trying to solve the problem. Oftentimes they're focusing on the data that is the symptom of the problem and not the problem itself. Is that right?
That is right, and I would even say, Bill, it's data is just one element. Of course, everyone's talking about data-driven marketing and the world that is operating in a very data-led way.
Sure.
But I think the behavioral challenge, as marketers, around focusing on the symptoms and not the root cause, is pretty much across the board. And before I give examples of why I say that and why I believe in that, let's talk a little bit about what's really is a fundamental root cause in marketing that we're all struggling with, right? And we're struggling with the manifestation of the struggle is in terms of the experiences we drive, and whether we are able to drive these seamless, frictionless experiences or not, right? Or if marketing is really able to drive the growth that we all expect marketing to drive,
Sure.
is really able to create new business models and value proposition from a consumer standpoint. There's got to be a reason why, on one hand, every single organization, every single CMO or CEO would love for that to happen, but there's a reason why we're all still struggling with it, right? This whole notion of an omni-channel experience is still a myth or is still a dream and not a reality. And I strongly believe that a big reason for why that happens is because the fundamental root cause of all those challenges and all those barriers is a massive level of fragmentation within the entire ecosystem, right? Which is the most difficult problem to solve. And what I mean by that is in organizations today, we are operating in big silos across data, massive amount of silos in terms of the marketing technology and the whole ad tech and the so-called martech ecosystem. Same silos then exist in your experience planning and strategy, because while we all would love to say we are centered around the consumer and centered around the human, we are mostly either centered around the product or we are centered around the channel.
Right. So, I mean, that's where most businesses struggle is that they are so focused on their products and really focusing on the channels in which to distribute those products and promote those products that they forget to really focus on the end customer, the person who's actually using the product in the first place and the needs that they have. To the extent that we can solve those needs, that's where we're going to add the most value and will be most successful.
And I think that is a core premise to the opportunity and the problem.
Okay.
And let's pick up that one very simple point. You said, as long as we can make effort to fulfill their needs, to understand what their needs are, and then to be able to deliver them at a time, location, and touch point of their choice. Very simple, plain English. The challenge, though, is how many of us and brands and organizations and marketers really and truly understand what her needs are at any given point of time.
Mm-hmm.
We think we do, but we really don't. We think we know her because we have all this data, we have all this behavioral information because we've run surveys, we've asked her questions on what she likes, what she doesn't like, and we usually tend to base our strategies, base our experiences on that information. But that is so myopic, because depending on who you are and what your product may be or where you may sit in the organization, your understanding of the consumer need and behavior is isolated to your world. So if you happen to sit in a product environment, your understanding of her and her life and her needs are very restricted to how she engages with the product, not what happens before or after. If you happen to be somebody who's responsible for so-called CRM or so-called email or paid media, your understanding of her is very myopic to how she engages with your channel. We don't think longitudinally through her journey and whatever is happening in her life to really put her at the center. Hence, our understanding of her needs are very limited and very fragmented, which ultimately leads to a fragmented experience. And oftentimes talking at her as opposed to really giving her what she needs, and at times even before she knows she needs it.
Well, so and that brings it to sort of looking at this from a channel discipline. Sort of, if you only have insights on, say, email and open rates, and that's all your entire experiences with your customer base, then you're going to respond to sort of what those needs are in that particular platform in that particular moment. But what you're saying is, by bringing all these data pieces together and sort of understanding the full experience and saying from discovery all the way through to advocacy and every step in between, what is the process? What is your consumer going through? What is she looking for? What are some of the things that she's really interested in? How is she discovering you? How is she engaging with you? How is she transacting with you? All the way through to that advocacy model. All of those pieces need to be taken into account to fully understand the need, and then therefore to be able to solve a true problem.
That is spot on. Now, underneath that vision, it's massive areas of the massive areas and pitfalls where where the system is breaking down, where the entire industry and operating model for the industry breaks down. Let's take it one by one, which ultimately is because what you just listed out, Bill, is the root cause.
Right.
That is what we are fundamentally trying to accomplish. But the fact that we are unable to is because there are many different pitfalls in our ability to do that.
And when you say when you say pitfall, what do you mean specifically?
Yes, so it means that, just take a very simple example. What you just laid out is a longitudinal journey that a consumer goes through in context to any brand. Right? Is what they do even before they've been driven awareness about the brand and the value proposition. When you try to reach them and you acquire them, and then at some point, hopefully, you engage them and drive lifetime value through loyalty and customer relationship. The place where there are pitfalls is one, like I said, the understanding of what her needs are flawed or are limited. We are looking at engaging with her through a very channel-led mindset, which means she may be engaging with us and giving us all those signals across many of the channels that we're not engaging her with. We are bypassing and ignoring those aspects. So the fact that let's take an example of a mother who's actually looking, and reading about diapers and so on, and reading about first-time mommers and so on. If we are not listening to those signals in our system, we may still be having her as somebody who's a young entrepreneur, who's just married and is single. And we continue to engage with her because in our first-party CRM data, that's how she's represented as. Whereas she's engaging with us on all the touch points, giving us signals, showing us intent that perhaps she's moving on. She has a life event that has happened, may not have responded to an email, but these are soft signals. So underneath this, where the system is broken, is one, all the data is channel-led, which means this is lying in fragmented different systems, and that's why our understanding of her is limited. Two, even if for some reason we are able to converge that data and harmonize it to ultimately have a universal understanding of who she is, the systems that we need to engage with her are not programmed or not sophisticated enough that can take those signals and determine what is the next best piece of messaging that I should drive to her based on the fact that she just consumed a piece of content that shows the intent that she's about to perhaps have a baby and she's looking to buy diapers. So bottom line is, the way we are structured as organizations, the way we plan, the way we execute those plans are all fractured and not frictionless, not aligned with the way she runs through her journey, all the way from curiosity to awareness to engagement to trial, and lifetime value and so on. Mm-hmm.
So from what you're saying is, in order to understand, based on the disparate data sets and understanding the various different channel architecture, by bringing it together, you're creating a full picture of what's really happening in your customer's life. And therefore, that would indicate what kind of information they need from you and what that next step should be from a marketing perspective. Is that right?
Absolutely. And that to me is is a fundamental shift from for marketing from a very push, very time-bound campaign mindset to become an always-on system of engagement that is always learning, that is always listening, and always interpreting those signals and learnings into human behavior, and then tying that into messaging that is channel agnostic, because it does not matter whether you need a diaper on an through an email campaign, or you need a diaper on television and traditional broadcast, or you clicked on a display ad to show intent that you need a diaper. Bottom line is, you as a human being are in need for a certain product, and we as brands have to be able to fulfill that at any given touch point, so that it's the fastest, simplest, and easiest possible path to purchase for you as a consumer.
So, and this is fascinating because essentially what you're saying is understanding sort of where all these places exist for those opportunities as a marketer, and what there's a predisposition here that you already have sort of as coming in from the perspective of Spotify, right? You're looking at this from a perspective of, I have an advertising platform that I can use to connect with audiences. You've got built-in need in the sense that you've got people who are listening on a regular basis, they're tuning in, and now what you're identifying is that if you can help the marketers be smarter and better about the messages that the audience actually wants, then that actually helps both parties. It helps you and Spotify because you're actually delivering more intelligent messaging that is actually wanted by your audience, and the marketers being more effective at delivering those messages because they know that where the life cycle is and where this audience is where their heads are at, and therefore what their needs are. And so the advertising isn't as disruptive and annoying because it's much more on message with where they are in their journey. Is that correct?
That is spot on. Yeah.
I love it. No, I love it because I think what it means is, I think what is rare about this conversation and what I really appreciate where you're coming from is that I don't find that most and I'm going to lump you into the category with the publishers, right? And that's the wrong way to talk about it. But in every category, whether it's music or whether it's television or whether it's terrestrial radio, whether it's outdoor billboards, all of these places, there's not that sort of deep understanding of the need from the publisher side to understand the customer journey. I hear it's all the time on the marketing side when you're looking at sort of brands that are trying to figure this part out. But being able to do that in partnership with a publisher who really understands and gets, hey, let's do this together because we both benefit from it, that's very refreshing. And it's not something that I've heard in a long time. So I'm pleased to hear that you're focusing on this, but you see the benefit both for your own brand as well as the brands that you serve. That's great.
See, that's a great point, Bill, that you make at the end, because oftentimes just saying it in a different way is coming from, sort of varying industries as well, and, healthcare being my last sort of an attempt. But where I happened to be in an organization that had two components, a two-sided marketplace, very similar to, at Spotify as well, where we were engaging directly with the consumers on the B2C side, but then we also worked with around 600 health systems on the B2B side. But I often believe that there is no such thing as B2B in our world today.
Right.
It's always B2B2C, because there's only one person paying and only one person dying. It doesn't matter who you engage and partner with. If we do not understand her needs at any given point of her life, then the kind of experiences and the value proposition will drive to her is at best going to be limited and broken, and fractured. And I think that to me is when people talk about data-driven marketing or become a data-driven organization, it's not so much about how much data you have or how well are you able to analyze it, how what sort of dashboards you have, how much can you look in the rear view, but it's all about how can you leverage data to look ahead to really influence that very simple next best piece of messaging to her. If you keep it that simple, then it just makes the life so simple as well and drive results and growth. The challenge, though, is that it is not easy to make happen, because this requires a fundamental shift on how you look at data, how your technology ecosystem is structured, how you're organized as an organization, not just in marketing, but across marketing, product, sales, and so on. How do you plan? Are you really planning longitudinally, which is a more difficult way to do it? How are your partnership structured? If you look at the agency model, most agencies are either diving really, really deep in media, or they're diving really deep in data, or they focus on one channel or the other, right? Or if they are really strong in all of these and they're weak in technology because they cannot make the visions a reality.
Right.
And hence, it's a very fragmented ecosystem from partnership standpoint as well. So I think if you look at it, while everything that you and I are talking about is perhaps a no-brainer, but the fundamental challenge that still lies within our industry is that there are massive amounts of silos that exist at all levels.
Well, and I think that the interesting thing about those silos is that while there's a desire to break them down, there's not an organizational structure to support that breakdown, right? I find this all the time is that because of the needs to compartmentalize, whether it's marketing and sales or whether it's even just within that journey, who's focusing in on the discovery process versus who's focusing in on advocacy, right? These things matter, and if all I'm focusing on is loyalty, then yep. I'm not really going to feed the right information to someone who's like in the discovery stage, right? So I think we have to figure out how does this holistically hold together so that the information yep. is shared in a way that even if my responsibility is loyalty and advocacy, I still have an appreciation and understanding of what the consumer is going through, both from an awareness and sort of an engagement perspective, as well as their initial transactions. If I understand those pieces of the journey, then I can do a much better job in the advocacy side, where then I can then feed back, okay, I know what they've been through, and so here are the things we're going to do to sort of create that raving fan that we want to have within our organization. You
hit the nail on the head, and I'll make 2 points, Bill. One is what you said is so accurate, because there's a book called Converge where it says that the experiences that organizations drive and deliver is a manifestation of how you're structured and how you organize.
That's right.
Which is so simple, right? So, and it's so real as well. And to your point on, the breaking down of the journeys and how you have different accountabilities within organizations. And that's where I believe modern marketing today needs systems thinking. I know we've spoken about design thinking for the longest time in context to marketing, and a lot of time people think design thinking is all about, how you design an experience. I believe design thinking is very synonymous with systems thinking, in the sense that it looks at the ecosystem. It believes in the notion of a machinery, or I often use this analogy of an assembled Formula One car, where most organizations are focusing on building the best tire out there, the best Michelin tire, the best engine, the best steering, the best chassis. What they don't even have, not that they cannot assemble the car, what they don't even have is a blueprint of the car. Mm-hmm. So what ends up happening is that while the person who's building the tire is building the tire for the Formula One Mercedes, but the guy who's building the chassis is building it for the Jeep.
Right.
And it is so extremely disconnected that these pieces aren't tied together. That's why you may be creating the best insights, you may have the best data possible, the best first-party direct consumer data, but how much of that is really leveraged today across organizations to really figure out the behaviors and the consumer's unmet need, which ultimately drives a program idea. Well, you still come up with a program idea and a campaign because you believe in it, right? But you never tie it back to the behavior that you want to drive and change.
And that's just it. I mean, I think until the metrics of success evolve and change, yes, we're going to be in the same position for a long time. Because again, if I'm only interested in impressions, and that's all yes, I care about, and I optimize my entire business on impressions, then none yes, of this stuff we're talking about matters. And yet, that's the whole interruption model that has not been working for a very, very long time. It's the reason why banner ads get 0.04% click-through rates. It's not about optimizing for exposure and impressions. I mean, that is a broken model, and that's it's seen its time. It's time for us to look at this from a pure customer journey perspective, understanding what the journey is, understanding what the challenges are throughout that journey, how we can add true value to the customer experience, and only then do we become part of that consideration in that journey. Otherwise, it's just talking at me, and I don't want to hear it.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. It is about the definition of success, what that really means from the eye of the consumer, because now the brand is no longer the protagonist, the consumer is. And the second part is how many organizations are able to make the definition of success and the KPIs consistent across the organization, regardless of where you sit. which means that a CIO cannot be measured on bottom line and driving standardization across the globe, while somebody in marketing, a CMO or a chief digital officer, is actually being measured on driving growth, on driving acquisition, on driving lifetime value. That's where the pitfalls are, and you spot on because that leads to a behavior. It's almost a car that where there's misalignment between the four wheels, and you can't blame them because they're incentivized and they're measured against different barriers,
That's right.
or different benchmarks.
And because that by itself creates the silo that everybody's trying to get out of, and that those
Yes.
until the metrics of success are unified, until the KPIs across the organization are holistic,
Yeah.
there will always be those silos because I'm focusing on, and my team is focusing on what we've been charged to do. And so very rightfully so, that silo exists and must exist in the confines of success within the organization.
And now, to going back to the first point you made on symptoms versus root causes, now tie this back to that. How do organizations end up solving it? They'll end up creating three more C-level roles: a CXO, a CDO, and a C blah blah and blah, right? To put as a bandage, as opposed to determining the fact that, look, there's an underlying fragmentation happening in the organization, and you need to drive convergence from the point of defining success consistently across the organization, driving alignment. Because the funny and the ironic part is that adding these further C-level suites is actually creating more fragmentation. It's an effort to kill fragmentation, but the end result is you end up fragmenting yourself even more. Right?
It's so true. In the attempt to break down the silos, we've created more silos, and it's
Exactly.
and that's the irony of ironies, because basically we know what we want in terms of our end game, but until the actual metrics of success and KPIs are the things that are changed, we are going to continue to exacerbate an existing problem rather than solve it.
Yes, because how many organizations would you have seen where they create a capability or the vision for omni-channel experience and they give it to a person who's responsible for e-commerce?
Right.
Isn't that an oxymoron? It's like, how is that even possible? And how do you think about it? Because we still continue to love bifurcating the world into analog and digital, into physical and digital. That's how we see it. We see it by channel. We see it what's closest to us, right? And that's why either you are a channel-led organization or a product-led organization, or in many cases, even technology-led organization.
Wow, Mayur Gupta, this has been so enlightening. I really appreciate all the conversation we've had. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining and providing us your insights. This has been awesome.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Thanks for the opportunity. It was really fun talking to you.